The very, very 30th day of 2024. I was going to say the last day of January 2024, which is tomorrow. Oops. So the International Atomic Energy Agency is claiming nothing got out of Japan's reactors. I just can't understand how people can be so evil. I don't get that. The time of the nuclear industry, ultimately you realize that's just what they are. They're worse than evil. It doesn't make any sense. They attack every species. That's what radiation does. This is only 2 of the 4 reactors were complete meltdowns. And each reactor is equal to all nuclear meltdowns in history combined. That's not counting the fact that at the top of each of the buildings were 2 fuel pools that had around 10 reactor cores. And each of these reactor cores are at least 100 Chernobyls. These are pure uranium, pure plutonium. They picked up 30 million one-ton bags, but yet here's the International Atomic Energy Agency and the media worldwide saying nothing got out. The buildings are completely gone. They're gone. And the world is saying nothing got out. Every academic, every journalist. So, should the world fight for humanity and the 8 million species against the cowardly nuclear industry? And cowardly is being polite. It's a very polite way to describe this industry. And so this video is desperation. It's utter desperation. So you're going to read their stories, then we're going to challenge their narrative with an absolutely unequivocal, overwhelming amount of supporting documentation that these are actually monsters. They're real life monsters. Forget Bigfoot, forget the vampires, forget the criminals, forget all the jails, the violent thugs. They got nothing combined worldwide, and all the prisons have they're like schoolyard bullies compared to the International Atomic Energy Agency and the nuclear industry. The International Atomic Energy Agency is part of United Nations. United Nations is a corporation that's taken over your planet, whether you can appreciate it or understand it. I hope you will, by the end of the video, I hope you'll come to your senses and join me and go to war. We are at war. Make no mistake about this. I'm at war. I've been at war for a very long time, for 2 decades. But since Fukushima, it's very, very, very easy to justify the war. They are at war with you. They are attacking you with lethal intentions. So, this story today, International Atomic Energy Agency's on-site review confirms the safety of Fukushima treated water. Fukushima treated water. The buildings don't exist anymore. And by their own admissions, the radioactive fallout of plutonium alone has covered the entire planet in less than 20 days. The official story is nothing got out. And that the plutonium that they emit to is equal to 70,000 times more than the atomic bomb fallout in Japan. But, I mean, that's not even equal to one of the fuel pools. There's 2 fuel pools at the top of the buildings. There's 8 fuel pools melted down. The official narrative is nothing got out, and everything is in 1,000 tanks. Despite that, there's 30,000 one-ton bags, and as some of the media says, it's 60
There's
million
about 60 million tons of contaminated soil that's being stored, planned to be stored, outside the Fukushima Daiichi perimeter fence. So
Well, 60 million one-ton bags. One-ton bag in the back of a pickup truck. A one-ton pickup truck is 10 rows of traffic around the entire planet, bumper to bumper, which was only 3% of the land. But nothing got out. That's the new story as of July the 23rd, 2023. Meltdowns never happened. There's no releases. Nothing got out. Everything is in the tanks. Have a nice day. You're being exterminated. Your species are on the brink of extinction post-Fukushima. So let's read this story. And let's walk you through some of the horror that has already happened, but which is now denied. And nothing happened. Nothing got out. There was no adverse side effects. Nuclear is wonderful. The International Atomic Energy Agency released a report Tuesday saying that its on-site review has confirmed the safety of Japan's discharge of tritium containing treated water from the crippled Fukushima #1 nuclear power plant into the sea. Tritium. Nothing got out on the tritium. From the crippled, these are not crippled obviously, they're completely destroyed. They're gone. They lost the entire inventories, which is 10 reactor cores basically per building. Japan's foreign ministry issued a statement on the same day saying that the International Atomic Energy Agency review is extremely important in ensuring reliability and transparency. So the International Atomic Energy Agency, the benchmark of nuclear, is saying nothing got out of these buildings. So this is completely not acceptable. This is outrageous. This is absurdness. And that the Japanese Foreign Ministry issued a statement the same day saying that the International Atomic Energy Agency review is extremely important in ensuring reliability and transparency. And that the International Atomic Energy Agency sent a review mission to Japan from October 24th to the 27th of 2023, and that the mission included experts from China and South Korea and held hearings with the Tokyo Electric Power Company, which is not a decommissioned authority. And that the operated nuclear plant in northeastern Japan, and that the Japanese government had also inspected the water discharges facilities at the plant. And they all agreed that nothing got out of the buildings. That's their assertion. On Tuesday, the International Atomic Energy Agency also released the result of an international comparison of the ability to analyze treated water and reported that the results show that Japan's measurements capabilities is reliable. So they're saying that nothing got out of the buildings. In 2013, the major medias, and this is just a fraction of them, this is a very important fraction at that, but this is just a fraction of them, claim to be in the fuel pool of a building that don't exist. Now, what could motivate major media to come up with a lie so easy to disprove? It's impossible to prove that they're in the building. It's easy to prove they're not in the building because the building doesn't exist. And there's not an academic in the nuclear industry on the planet couldn't bust that story wide open in 10 seconds or less. There's not a journalist on the planet that couldn't bust that story wide open in 10 seconds or less, and every one of them refused to do it. Every one of them regurgitated that narrative instead of the real narrative. What's the catalyst for something like that? And then every nuclear scientist on the entire planet knew that the reactor 3, for instance, that the fuel pools and the reactor cores, which was running at the time, were gone. Just the picture tells the story, period. You don't need to be an engineer. You don't have to have a degree. The reactor cores and fuel pools at the top of the building, there is no top to the building. If it's not underwater, it immediately catches fire, burns and incinerates at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, and then disperses the particulates, the atoms, into clouds that cover the entire planet. It's very distressing. that the entire planet has chosen to manipulate you worldwide, and successfully, as far as I can tell, has succeeded in that manipulation. Very, very frustrating. And now we see the die-offs of the species, the intensity of the starvation of birds and whales and species is stunning. The failure of the reproduction systems in the mammals and animals and birds is stunningly clear. It's stunning. This is clearly an extinction level event. This is another model of a 26 days of radioactive fallout. Covers the entire planet. All the models from all the major institutions worldwide agree with that. They're going to talk about a study from Germany that suggested that the Pacific Ocean would be contaminated in 6 years. But this model shows that in less than 30 days, the entire planet was covered in radioactive fallout.
Maybe worse than thought. Studies from last year indicate that radioactive water will contaminate the entire Pacific Ocean in just 6 years. Kim Min-ji reports.
This graphic shows the gradual contamination of the Pacific Ocean due to leaks of radioactive water from the crippled Fukushima nuclear plant in Japan. The simulation, which was run by a German marine research institute, shows the entire Pacific waters being polluted by radioactive water in just 6 years.
But the problem was we covered the entire planet. This is France's model showing 1 million to 10 million atoms, not of tritium, but of cesium-137 per cubic meter of air covering the entire planet. And this model stops at the 26th of March 2023, which is 15 days after the tsunami, 9 days after the last reactor detonated. The entire planet. And slightly over 2 weeks is covered perpetually forever. The Fisher story is that never happened. We have studies showing xenon-133 at 1 million becquerels a square meter, 20 million particles. Particles are actually much worse than atoms. They're physical particles from the reactors themselves. 131 per liter fell on the U.S. sustained. And a backup study in California, or Ottawa, Canada, there's many other studies from California also show the same thing, was the West Coast was hit with 220 million atoms per liter of iodine-129 in the rain after Fukushima. This has a 15 million year half-life. And they're not a big emitter for distance-wise. They pulse at the speed of light, and they'll destroy millions of atoms or cells and chromosomes and DNA in your body every second per atom. This pulse of energy in every direction. Your body has to repair every one of them. But it's also enough to saturate the thyroid glands of everything and everybody. I mean saturated, which means all the newborn birds and insects and mammals and animals and humans are producing radioactive hormones for 15 million years. For 150 million years, because there's 10 half-lives. And that's what the 15 million year... So when you hear of a half-life, you think of 1/2, right? But that's the game they play on you. We launched research expeditions for 6 years at great cost and great harm, and vilified and demonized and smeared, attacked, shot at, assaulted, arrested. They've done everything they could to get rid of me. There's every smear on the internet you can imagine about me. There's every type of propaganda in history about me. And yet, typically you're going to see my phone number and my name in almost every single show, if I don't forget to put it. The reactors are gone. They're completely gone. So they lost the entire inventories. I don't hide away from anybody. And my phone number's there all the time, and always has been. And I realized the importance that somebody had to take the brunt. Somebody had to go out and take the abuse in order to tell the truth. So what's the point of hiding away? Because it's going to find you, and that'll make it worse. Just as well stand tall and take it on the chin over and over and over. And it's a small price to pay for 8 million species and the future of humanity. It's a very, very tiny price to pay. And if you got nothing to hide, why hide? Right? So we've done these research expeditions. And what we discovered was the species to your left are exterminated. So before we get into the rest of the show, it's so important that you understand this is actually, what I'm telling you is real. It's real because we went back for 6 years. We went back for 5 more years to see if the species came back. The species didn't come back. The species to your left are exterminated because of radioactive fallout. And it's permanent, which means you sterilize the ocean. That's the only way that can happen. And so the migratory birds, which normally would feed and feast in the tidal zones, is now naked and barren. There's nothing there. It's like landing on the moon. You will starve to death. Whereas before, millions and millions of birds would migrate along the coastline, feed on the krill, the shrimps, the anchovies, the sardines, the herring, etc., etc., etc. And also in the tidal zones where they would take breaks and there's thousands of invertebrates without the backbones for them to feast on. And instead what we're seeing is millions and millions of birds of both spectrums of the food chain showing up emaciated. And what I mean by that is like the dovekites and Cassini auklets, the storm petros. These are microscopic feeders. The cormorants or I can't remember the names of the birds. The common murres, for instance, shows up by the millions emaciated. They can dive all day, and they do at 600 feet. Now they feed on everything, squid and anchovies and sardines and herring and everything else. So you had both spectrums of the food chain showing up at the same time in multiple years, emaciated. That's the sterilization of the oceans. But we went out and backed this with the research expeditions because we knew the reactors actually blew up. We knew there was actually radioactive fallout. We knew that the damage would manifest in the nursery of the planet, the ocean. The lifeblood of the ocean is the ocean of the planet, and then that produces fresh water and gathers up on the interior. Right, every day, tens of thousands of miles of rain clouds will bring fresh water through evaporation and into the coastline. When it hits the mountains, they lose their payloads and they replenish the glaciers, the estuaries, the ponds, the streams, the rivers. These species are exterminated. This is an extinction event. And I have been at this relentlessly since Fukushima. It's been relentless. I'm consumed by the world to fight back. You have to fight back. You've got the ability. You don't realize it maybe, but you have that ability. I can assure you, you have the ability. I provide you with a ridiculous amount of documentation. There's 0 ways to I can be debunked. You cannot debunk my information. It can't be done. That is the most terrifying statement imaginable. Because what I show is a perfect extinction level event has already played out, and it can only get worse. The species didn't come back. We went there year after year following the original discovery in hopes that the species would recover. The first year we went for 6 months straight without coming home on the ocean. And the whole time I kept praying I would find no aces. It was an extinction event. And so I can't switch that off. I can't. All these years, I still can't switch what I've seen with my own two eyes. I cannot switch that off. I can never get any rest from that. I can never hide from that. That is dominant in my mind all day, every day. And it manifests 5 days a week on these live presentations. In the hopes that the world would pick up the baton, and under normal, every other normal circumstances, that's exactly what would happen. But for the media ability to fool and trick and coerce, and it's in order for that lie to work, all the media has to participate in the lie. In order for that lie to work, every university on the planet has to participate in that lie. The lie can't exist without 100% participation in the lie. And that is terrifying. That is a horrifying. And it's undeniable. Can you deny? Because you can go and look all of these people up, and at the Unit 4 at Fukushima, and you'll find the videos, and I can play the videos for you, and I do many, many times. Multiple times each week. Which is just a fraction of the media that has come out publicly, and that the entire CBS has to participate in that lie. Everybody at CBS knew they were not in Fukushima. Everybody at BBC, these are massive corporations, had to participate in that lie. The editors, producers, the videographers, the makeup artists, everybody had to participate in that lie. Particularly opera management. Same thing for ABC Australia, same thing with CNN, and we expect no less from CNN. Now, it's beyond reproach that I've done this year after year after year after year after year for 6 years. It's beyond reproach. And that I took 1,000, 2,000 pictures and videos a day with GPSs between every 100 or 200 pictures. So that people can go out and replicate the exact same routes, the exact same islands that I done. And nobody, of course, is going to replicate it, because then the truth comes out, which is the most terrifying statement again. And I'm not doing this because I'm bored. I'm not doing this because it's easy. I'm doing this in desperation because you should be doing it too. And you have the ability. I gave you the ability. I've provided all the documentation. If you go to my playlist and download everything there, you will find out that you will become extremely articulated in a very short period of less than a week or 2 weeks of watching that material, that evidence, that documentation, that unassailable documentation. You too will be extremely articulated. Nobody's going to beat you in this argument. Nobody can beat you. That ability is there for you. It's waiting for you, screaming for you. Wiped out, exterminated, gone permanently. Gone permanently. Exterminated, gone permanently. This is extermination. Exterminated. It's exterminated, exterminated, exterminated. And there is no maybes about what I'm telling you. I'm 100% honest 100% of the time. So let's talk about the filtration system. August 12th, 2014, TEPCO to abandon the AREVA, which is French water filtration system at Fukushima. For the last 3 years, the system has been unused and kept out of operation. So why would you leave it unused and kept out of operation? Because the minute you try to put water through it, you can never get back in the building. April 21st, 2014, rather. 6 months before the AREVA gave up, which was 3.5 years later, 3 years later, in 1 month, TEPCO is unable to bring the contaminated water issues under control at Fukushima plant. The advanced liquid processing system, the ALPS, is yet to function reliably. It not only has, and this is 3 years later. It's not that it has to function reliably. It can't function. You can't filter something so small that you can put 200 million of them on the head of a needle and you can't see it. You can't filter that. You have to contain everything. TEPCO says the groundwater bypass operation is not having effect 2014. So water is coming down the mountain, running through Fukushima plant straight into the ocean. It's built on a hill, right? And so the idea was to block the water from coming through and then pumping it around and directly into the ocean to stop the extra contamination. It couldn't be done. So think about every time you have a typhoon, every time it rains, every time the snow melts. That filters right through the site. And the country. The country is radioactive. TEPCO officials admitted that the groundwater bypass operations failed to reduce the tons of water. First off, tons is a ridiculous small number compared to the true numbers. September 18, 2013, TEPCO failed to deliver on a promise to install fences to restrict the contamination from leaking into the Pacific Ocean. The buildings are completely gone. These are not leaks. The tanks were built to trick you into thinking that they have it under control. And now have been weaponized against you to think that it's only 2.2 grams of tritium. That the ice wall operation wasn't meeting expectations, because why would you build an ice wall? How can you stop water by building a wall, first off? You got no top and no bottom. How can you stop the radiation? And second off, why would you build an ice wall when you can build a real one and walk away? If it did have some mitigating factors. South Korea opposition lawmakers depart for Japan to protest Fukushima tritium. So here you had the elites of the political world of South Korea going to protest tritium, despite the fact that the documentation that I showed you already has been widely available to them for 12 years at that point. This is just one of the many medias claiming they're at the top of the building, 100 feet above the stump that you're looking at.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011, leading to the country's worst nuclear disaster.
Like, it's so ludicrous that they done that. It's hard to believe they done it. Why would you do something like that when it's obvious you can't be at the top of the building and the world can turn on you in a heartbeat? And didn't. By the way, they've done the same thing not just for Reactor 4, they've done the same thing for Reactor 3, which doesn't even exist. That should have been razed all the way to the ground. There is nothing left. They're telling you that they're filtering the water in a building that don't exist. So, on the 10th anniversary, the year of the 10th anniversary in January, there was over 700 pictures released from a drone, a very high quality drone, you know, particularly for that era. So I downloaded it. I'm the only person I know on the entire planet that has come out and talked about it. Well, at least in the English-speaking world. I know China put it up. I found it on a China newspaper I had translated, and I couldn't understand what I was looking at. I translated it, and this is what they were talking about. And they were linked to TEPCO's website, and there were 700 plus pictures. And you can find a video about that in my playlist. And so I zoomed in on it, and I started realizing that everything was pixelated when it came to the nuclear. When you zoomed in, everything was pixelated for 700 pictures. So why would you release those pictures on the 10th anniversary? And so you zoom in on every single picture, and you're trying to understand what the hell you're looking at. It was very difficult. But I know that's Reactor 4, and I know that's the common spent fuel pool over there. So, but why was the common spent fuel pool pixelated completely out? These are the original pictures from a drone, but you had to zoom in to extrapolate that, to comprehend that this was happening. And behind, on the far side over there to your left, you can see all kinds of containers from transport trucks stacked up from the tsunami. Tsunami washed right through here, and the common spent fuel pool is at the same height. And it went right through there too. So they lost around 10 million pounds of uranium, plutonium, fuel rods there. They covered up successfully. When you zoom in, it's hard to wrap your mind around that everything is pixelated. Why is all this pixelated out? Why did they release it? Why wasn't this released with the first 1900 pictures batch back in 2011? And you'll find 6 videos in my playlist where I go through those pictures methodically. A brutal amount of work, by the way. But this is the common spent fuel pool right here, which is right behind reactor 4. And that's towards the ocean that way. And this is towards the interior. The administrations are way over there. But again, you can see all these transport truck containers stacked up behind, because the tsunami ran right through there. So they lost that too. So I'm zooming in on this, and everything I'm looking at is pixelated, and it's blowing my mind. This is the common spent fuel pool, completely blotched out. There's only one reason you're going to do that, isn't it? And you can see the enormity of the damage that the tsunami... I've had people deny that, come out and attack me when I said this was Fukushima, despite the fact that TEPCO released these pictures of Fukushima. But I've actually had people come out and call me a liar. This, by the way, is the dry storage facility. This is between reactor 5 and 6 and reactor 1, 2, 3, and 4. It's right on the shoreline, and the tsunami went right through it. But at reactor 5 and 6, which is quite a far north of reactor 1, 2, 3, and 4, why is that pixelated? Or why is the pump house pixelated? Or why is the vent stack for the fuel pools pixelated out of reactor 6? Let's talk about the United Nations International Atomic Energy Agency for a minute. International Atomic Energy Agency's chief visit to Korea fails to quell concern about the Fukushima wastewater dumping. This is July the 10th, 2023. This is Rafael Grossi, which is the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is the United Nations. I would like to emphasize that the release of the treated water stored at Fukushima Daiichi power station is a national decision by the government of Japan. And that this report is neither a recommendation nor an endorsement of the policy. Grossi wrote. Because people were protesting heavy. So earlier that year, Japan has 30 million one-ton bags that they want to use again for farmlands and everything else, which makes 0 sense. Because you spent billions and billions of dollars picking it up to get people to move back into the nuclear wasteland. And now you're going to use it to grow food in. How can we be disconnected? The International Atomic Energy Agency in 2023 came out and defended Japan's move to reuse the nuclear waste for growing food. Something that if you've seen pre-Fukushima in a Hollywood movie, you would disregard immediately. You probably would turn the movie off. It would be so ludicrous of assertion. The International Atomic Energy Agency says they're not a regulator and not in a position to judge or approve Japan's soil recycling project. And it's the same thing for the water. They're not a regulator and not in a position to judge or approve it. International Atomic Energy Agency Rafael Grossi said, "This is a very special night today." He told the Prime Minister Kishida before handing him a thick blue folder containing the final report, claiming that everything met the International Atomic Energy Agency standards. Despite the fact that the buildings are completely destroyed, and there's 4 of them, but 8 fuel pools are gone also. We've never seen a fuel pool meltdown in the history of humans. In 80 years, we don't know of a single instance where that has happened. And a fuel pool, typically 2 of them at the top of each building, you're talking about around 10 reactor cores. Each reactor core is at least 100 Cheronobyls. So picking up 30 million one-ton bags, but the official story, according to the International Atomic Energy Agency in today's paper again, asserts that nothing got out of the reactors. Well, explain the 30 million one-ton bags. Go down and write on the 30 million one-ton bags that Fukushima is safe. Of course, the International Atomic Energy Agency is not going to have a press meeting right here, and they're not going to stand on these bags and say nothing got out of Fukushima, are they? So why are they claiming nothing got out? Because they don't want to be responsible for the death of the ocean. By the way, there's 105,000 sites in 2019 like that. 105,000 sites. Think about that statement. 105,000 sites. Go read the story yourself. 2019. There are currently 105,000 on-site storage locations throughout the prefecture. And Fukushima Prefecture is not the only spot. Remember, in Tokyo, they can't get rid of the sewage. It's too radioactive. They can't get rid of the garbage. It's too radioactive. They can't get rid of the ash at the incinerators. It's too radioactive. They can't get rid of the sediment from the water filtration for your drinking water because it's too radioactive. And that the air in Tokyo in 2011 was 270 times greater than peak nuclear weapon fallout. These are the most difficult videos for me, by the way. Because it's desperation that I'm here. I'm here on my hands and knees begging this planet. I'm begging this planet. I'm begging you to make a stand, to fight back, to make a difference. You got to do it. Japan's nuclear wastewater discharge plant provokes worldwide protest. Well, the buildings are gone. They've been releasing it non-stop after day 6. The buildings are gone. They're claiming that they never released anything till August the 24th of last year. The International Atomic Energy Agency's role is to analyze and confirm data provided by TEPCO, which is not a decommission authority, not directly collect samples and verify them. And by the way, Japan is the 3rd biggest donor to the International Atomic Energy Agency. High radiation levels around the plant, worldwide we're talking about, high radiation levels around the plant prevented the helicopters from dumping water on the spent fuel rods at Fukushima. Not because of tritium, because of curium and plutonium and americium, neptunium, and the many, many, many lethal isotopes. In front of the nuclear power plants, it was up to 1 billion becquerels, 1 billion atoms per kilogram of iodine-131 in seaweed near the reactors. The official story is that never happened. Everything I'm showing you, the official story is that never happened. The official story is that does not exist. What do you think they're making all of these assertions for, that it doesn't exist, it didn't happen? Because they don't want the blame for the nuclear industry of destroying humanity and the 8 million species. And they're winning. You have no idea how much they're winning. You have no idea how late it is, how far down the hole we are, how dark this actually is. The world needs you to gut up, to put everything else aside and gut up and go to war. You need to go to war. It's calling your name. If you're here, it already called your name. You're already in the war. You just probably don't realize it. Japan's officials issue Fukushima radioactivity alert. The radioactive discharge is out of control. Contamination is, using the word seeping into the ocean and leaking, is words I can't forgive. The people that authored these words, I can't forgive them. If I would meet them face to face, I would immediately spit in their face. I wouldn't hesitate. You would have to restrain me. I hate them so much. So much contempt. So much disrespect for what they have done to our planet and done to you and your loved ones and your friends and your families. And you would too. Water at Fukushima plant is 3 times more cesium than Chernobyl's total release. Underscores the scale of the never-ending threat. There's many people warned you originally. They grew silent or they were fired and replaced by the pro-scum, degenerate nuclear community. And there's an endless amount of these scumbags. How can the International Atomic Energy Agency say nothing got out of Fukushima and 2.2 grams of tritium and not explain away these bags, these 105,000 sites like that? 400 tons of highly radioactive water going to the Pacific each day from Fukushima. Top nuclear regulator. This is a crisis. The New York Times, 2013. So how can we go from all of this to nothing got out? How did we ever get to that point? Because of the silence, no opposition. And then start that indoctrination. How can anybody in the International Atomic Energy Agency look anybody in the face and say that nothing got out? Will the International Atomic Energy Agency go there and stand on top of them bags and give a press release and say nothing got out, only 2.2 grams of tritium and it's all in 1,000 tanks? I think not. Health officials are investigating radiation levels along the coast near San Francisco after finding higher than typical readings. So absolutely no correlation with nuclear disaster, says UC Berkeley professor, who we know is a perpetual lawyer, by the way, and compares eating a banana to drinking water from Fukushima. And if you try to take him to the Fukushima site, he would claw your eyes out. He would scream. He would beg you, please. Fukushima reactor cores melted right down into the ground, nuclear expert. The radioactive material is getting washed out into the Pacific Ocean. You know, there's people out there saying that there was no tsunami at the plant itself. I play the clips here sometimes. That there was only 12 inches of water ran through the site. Forecast map of radioactive clouds shows a threat to the United States and the West Coast. This is NOAA's model of the radioactive fallout based on just cesium and iodine-131 over 40 days. And it's based on venting. It's not based on the destroyed buildings. It's based on venting for number 2 reactor. So when people look up number 2, that's the only building that looks like it's intact. It's 100% meltdown, and it did go China syndrome. It burnt constantly for days. Japan doctors completely beyond comprehension how huge the contamination of the ocean will be. It's beyond comprehension. Fukushima radioactive material is poured in the landfills to enter the sea, and it's spreading over the whole world. There was many people come out and try to warn you. The media made sure that there was tons of distractions, a ridiculous amount of distractions, and that 2011 was an exceptional year. (2011) was an exceptional year. Just bear with me. Let me see if I can. Let me see if I can find. I think I did. There it is. 2011 was an extraordinary year. There was a lot of distractions. There was the tsunami, of course. And I remember watching it. I made 2 videos on that day because I knew nuclear plants got hit. First one was to warn people that might be watching my video from Japan to get to higher grounds. Followed by another video a few hours later that the nuclear power plant was inupdated. And that this was a catastrophic event. So let's go through some of this because there were some huge distractions in the media, right? U.S. forces killed Al-Qaeda leader, which a lot of people smarter than me dispute that actually happened. They took the body out to sea and dumped it. And there's no evidence. Why would you do that? We've never heard of that before. The Egyptian president Mubarak quit. It was ousted by the globalists, right? And there was all kinds of madness in the streets for about a month. The president of Tanzania fled it, and copycat protests became the Arab Springs, which dominated the media in 2011. Libya, what they done to Muammar Gaddafi, what they done to him live. CNN ran it live. It's too horrible to even say what they done to him on the live stream. And then that turned into a nightmare. That was major media for about a month and a half. Prince William married Catherine Middleton, and that dominated the medias for a month before and a month after. And it was pathetic. All the media screamed that story. This is all 2011. The English riots hit their peak in London after that, a month later. That dominated the media, of course. Steve Jobs died that year also. That dominated the media for about a month. And the death of North Korean leader Kim Jong-il dominated the media. That whole year, the last thing anybody really, if you're watching TV in the media, the last thing you would have heard about was Fukushima. And then they were hoping the war in Libya would downgrade the Fukushima hype. You know, just the pictures of the tsunami invoked just heartbreak, right? I remember it so clear. And even today, when I watch the videos, and I do randomly, of the tsunamis, it still evokes incredible emotions in me. It's heartbreaking. Nuclear official TEPCO made Fukushima plant into a machine for generating radioactive water, and the runoff from the molten atomic cores is now in the groundwater in the ocean. In other words, there was no contain. You can't contain a nuclear meltdown. But they seem to convince the planet that was contained, that nothing got out, and everybody last year was protesting tritium of all things. Unimaginable to me. When the story played out, we covered it every single day, and it was unimaginable that this story was happening every day. Just as unimaginable as it is today, when I come out and tell you that the International Atomic Energy Agency is the number one enemy of humanity in the 8 million species. This is not a conjecture. This is not an opinion. I'm dead serious. And you better be too. You need to get educated. This is not a game. We're in real trouble here. The tsunami invokes so much, it's easy to miss the big picture. The discharges of Fukushima nuclear material into the Pacific Ocean has effectively contaminated the sea. That's the Japan Times, who's currently telling you nothing's ever got out of the buildings. And that the melted reactor cores will burn again if water is not perpetually poured in. Well, the interesting thing about this is that the reactors don't need oxygen. They can burn at the deepest part of the ocean. They don't need oxygen. TEPCO is proposing some of it be dumped into the ocean. TEPCO should only be on trial. It should never be in a position of authorities. The reason TEPCO was left in charge, figuratively speaking, of course, is because you would blame TEPCO instead of the nuclear industry, which is who should take the entire blame, who you should have nothing but contempt for. If you have a grain of humanity in you, you would hate them with every passion, everything in your body. So it was easy to get lost in this. It was easy. They flooded the victims struggling for life, the heartbreaks, the heartaches, the total destruction, the unimaginable destruction, the inconceivable amount of destruction. And make no mistake, you're talking about chemical factories, you're talking about oil facilities, you're talking about all kinds of hideous man-made material being released into the environment. But none of it compares, and it's all horrible, but none of it compares with nuclear fallout. The radiation from nuclear fallout is 2 billion times more toxic than the industrial poison. So the industrial poison released in these communities and cities is brutal. But it can be diluted in the oceans. That can actually be diluted. But radiation can't. You're just spreading it everywhere. You're infesting everything. Experts can't be changed and can't be stopped. The radioactive Fukushima water will continually enter the ocean. The West Coast should be alarmed at the lack of testing. And does anybody remember these pictures of houses drifting out to sea, burning? 230,000 becquerels per square meter of cesium on the athletics fields in Koto. 6 times the size of the limit sets for radiation control areas. That's in Tokyo, which means you should have abandoned Tokyo. So as soon as you got a meltdown, you should have abandoned your country, no matter which country you're in. Because radiation covers the planet in about 30 days. It's a disgusting industry that shouldn't exist. Associated Press, radioactive material spewed into the air and the sea at Fukushima. We don't even know where the 3 melted reactor cores are too, said nuclear expert. It's not under control at all, 2014, and still getting worse 3 years later. 105,000 sites like this in 2019. Under these tarps are 1-ton bags of radiation. But yet the official story, the International Atomic Energy Agency, UN's, little monster, little moron society, is telling you nothing got out. None of this happened. Nothing I showed you tonight happened. Everything I'm showing you tonight is a lie. That's what they're saying. Believe them. Don't believe your own eyes. Discharges of Fukushima nuclear material have effectively contaminated the sea. This is reactor 1 detonating. And every nuclear scientist has seen that, knew the fuel pools were gone, knew the reactor core is gone. As soon as you seen that, they knew. Japan government in chaos, completely out of control at Fukushima. The melted reactor cores are contaminating the Pacific Ocean with the full range of radioactive material. And we can quantify the assertion because they picked up over 30 million 1-ton bags in Japan on just 3% of the land in Fukushima Prefecture alone. In other words, they should have picked up 30 trillion 1-ton bags in Japan alone. This is the heat signatures of 4 reactors, reactor 1, 2, 3, and 4. And it's impossible not to acknowledge that they're gone when you look at that. And there's not a nuclear scientist on the planet who looked at that and didn't say, oh, they're all gone. They left the bags right in the rice fields and continue to grow rice. The 1-ton bags of radiation. The qualification for filling up the bag was 100,000 becquerels, 100,000 atoms per kilogram. And you got to multiply that by 66.66666 to get a square meter. TEPCO official is extremely serious. We're unable to control the radioactive water seeping out of Fukushima. So how can you call that seeping out? How can you call something like that seeping? when you had 2 fuel pools at the top of reactor 3 that are completely gone, how can you use the word seeping and not jump off a skyscraper immediately after saying it in shame for being such a despicable monster, such a disgusting parasite, such a burden on humanity? It's the only way you can describe everybody in the nuclear industry, including the nuclear students who, when they graduate, their job is to destroy you. We've known for 2 years that massive amount of water flows under Fukushima plant. Flows. Officials unable to explain why they kept the secret. That's NHK 2013. That explosion I just showed you of reactor 1, that's the fuel pools are gone. They evaporated instantly in the blink of an eye. It's hard to appreciate the containment of those buildings. 40 million becquerels of iodine-131 in a single bed of kelp off Southern California because it washes back down in the rainfall to the coastline and gets caught up in kelp. And pretending it's not happening is not a solution, by the way. That's the official picture, and this is the official picture. In 2013. Japan government, there's endless headlines over several months about this. Japan government prepares plan to flee Tokyo. That's ABC News Australia, who now says nothing got out. Except they're not going to go there and stand there with their cameras and say nothing got out, are they? It would be like Chernobyl on steroid if the spent fuel catches fire, says a nuclear engineer who worked at the Denical plant, and that each building holds 3,450 spent fuel assemblies, which is around 6 million pounds, right? So 3,450, I believe it was. And each assembly is 1,800 pounds. That's 6 million pounds. They're lowballing the number. There's 4 buildings, so let's multiply it by 4 just to get the lowball. You're talking about 24, almost 25 million pounds. You're talking about 25 million pounds. The Fisher story is 2.2 grams got out, and it's in 1,000 tanks. Just 2.2 grams. But the reality of it is, because I showed you the documentation, right, and you can't deny it. You cannot deny the evidence. Is at least 25 million. And I can guarantee it's a lot more than that, because you remember the spent fuel pool? That was another 10 million. So that's 34 million. And remember reactor 6? So add another 6 million. That's 40 million pounds. Remember the dry storage in those pictures that were pixelated? So you can see the building. They built that contraption off-site and brought it in and assembled it. But there's the top of reactor 4, which should be up here. So there's the top of it. But when you look at the destruction, you can see it right here, where my finger is pointed. So there's nothing left to the building. So they put this contraption, these panels, that's a single panel, that's lifted in with cranes, and that's held there by gravity. You can't physically stand there. But inside of that contraption, they say it looks like this. Everything is normal. This is what the official story is of the interior of something that doesn't exist. California rainwater, New York Times contributor confirms, was 181 times above drinking water standards for iodine-131. There's going to be 10 times more iodine-132, 30 times more iodine-133, 31 times more iodine-129. If you got that ratio, you're going to have similar ratios of curium, which is the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rods, and that you need lead shielding 20 times thicker for than you do for plutonium. This is exterminating all the species. There's not a nuclear academic on the entire planet that when he seen that picture didn't know that the reactors were gone and remained silent. There's not a single university looked at that and didn't know the spent fuel pool and the reactor cores were gone and remained silent. And that even today they refuse to acknowledge that that happened. Despite that's from their website. You can go there right now on TEPCO's website and download the same friggin' picture. And they're the first ones to tell you that never happened. That's not real. You can go to their website and download the pictures yourself. It's unbelievable that we're having this conversation. It's unbelievable that the world is not curb stomping these scumbags. Nuclear fallout will engulf Taiwan. People should stay home and take off their clothing and cleanse the nuclear contaminants and throw away their clothing and their shoes and that. And they should shave their head at the same time because radiation is going to get into that too. None got out of the reactor, so why did you pick up 30 million one-ton bags? I need an answer. Unprecedented phenomenon from using salt water in Fukushima reactors. And so this made it even worse because you're spraying salt water, which the reactors can't handle, period. And so what happens is this is a phenomenon they knew about in the 50s, where the sulfur is liberated at high temperatures. And they create these spherical balls that will ingest curium, uranium, plutonium, americium, neptunium, the strontium isotopes, and turn them into super hot particles that are extremely mobile and not very solutable in water. They're very easy to liberate back into the environment, and they don't need the jet streams to cover the entire planet. And they're hot particles, which means they're pulsing energy at very long distances every second, almost at the speed of light. And you're talking about, these are hot particles. And so for 40 days, they sprayed this water on these extreme temperatures, and they created another Fukushima every single day, because that water was turned into a weapon. So you can say 40 million pounds of physical uranium and plutonium. Like when we've done the numbers on reactor 4, you're talking about 21,000 pounds of plutonium alone. 21,000. Using their numbers, their ratios. 21,000 pounds of plutonium being liberated into the environment in 6 days. 21,000. But for spraying the uranium, spraying the salt water on the reactors is like creating meltdowns every day that it releases into the environment because it becomes ionized and radiated and atomized in aerosol and released into the environment as sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs that are hot particles. They've done everything to make it the worst possible scenario imaginable, and then they try to hide it from you and continue to successfully hide it from you. All of Japan contaminated by Fukushima. A realistic estimate is 60,000 kilometers and 46 million people. This is Helen Caldicott. But Helen Caldicott will tell you Fukushima Reactor 4 didn't even melt down. They come out and give you some tidbits of truth on one side of your mouth and then stab you in the friggin' back on the other side. I'm going to play this clip of Helen Caldicott because you got to hear it to believe it. This is a condensed version from a radio interview where she was asked, was this the real picture or was that the real picture? And her answer is frightening.
me ask you this. You said that if the spent fuel pool in number 4 collapses, that you would evacuate your family from Boston. Think we would ever know the truth of what's going on there? And the reason I ask is because we've seen coverage in the national news media here in the United States from ABC News and others that take video cameras in, saying that they're being given exclusive access to number 4 in the removal of the fuel rods, which is said to have begun. And what we see in the video being shared here in America is a pristine interior building. It doesn't look like a building in which the top blew off in a hydrogen explosion.
The Japanese are very tidy people, and they have, by robot control and by human beings, removed the debris from the top of Building 4, and it does look pristine.
You gotta be an unbelievable scumbag to do what she just done. And she done it in a couple of hundred interviews. But yet, she come out with some useful information, didn't she? 60,000 kilometers occupied by 46 million people is contaminated from Fukushima. All of Japan. But then at the other side of her face, she's doing hundreds of interviews where she's saying the building didn't melt down and that they got the fuel out of the pool. She's wrote 14 anti-nuclear books. And she's laughing at you every second of the day, man. Don't think for a second that she's some sweet lady. Don't fool yourself. And so a lot of these pictures I noticed when you zoom in on the back where it says International Atomic Energy Agency is a photocopy piece of paper printed out, and then that's a paper soup, by the way. Now the International Atomic Energy Agency didn't go to the site until last year. It's only been there 5 times, and all of them between last year. We covered that relentless amount of times last year. So, like, you've seen pictures like this show up, but remember, the reactors need 4,500 tons a minute. These hoses can only deliver 300 tons a day. And the idea was to lull you into complacency and think that, oh, well, they got it under control, or they're doing their best. And it was the complete opposite. They didn't do anything. You couldn't. It's a nuclear meltdown. Nuclear scientists still haven't gone there today, 13 years later. Radiation limits too high after Fukushima, a Belarus expert. Japan allows 20 times more cesium in drinking water than near Chernobyl. The official story is nothing got out, only 2.2 grams of tritium, according to the International Atomic Energy Agency. And that's in 1,000 tanks. Everything got out. And that the ocean currents, if it was just going into the ocean, which it wasn't, occurred in some, and I played the clip for you earlier, where they say 6 years later the entire Pacific would be irradiated. But the reality is the entire planet was irradiated immediately, within 6 days. Japan was hit so friggin' hard, they had 865,000 extra cancers in the first year. Not everybody got health care. Not everybody went to the doctor. Not everybody was diagnosed. And cancer is just one of the many illnesses and diseases, not autoimmune deficiencies and injuries and illnesses. Besides cancer. There's heart, liver, lung, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline. Surface forecast shows radioactive xenon-133 lingering over Florida. This is the Norwegian Institute for Research. Troubled. Still not enough power to run crucial machinery after connecting the power lines to Fukushima. Fukushima completely destroyed. There was no way you can connect power lines. Like the perpetual lies told by the nuclear industry from the very inception, the very beginning, shows an industry that should be locked up permanently. And there's many people out there who suggest much harsher penalties. I think they should get I think they should be sent to Fukushima instead of the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society. And that's the quickest, cheapest, best way to get rid of these despicable subhuman species. Still not enough power to run crucial machinery after connecting power lines. 8 days after Fukushima, they said they connected power to Reactor 3. We covered those headlines. Reactor 3 didn't even exist. They said they're going to go in and power wash your home, the radiation off your home, like it's dirt from a construction site or something. In their paper suits. You can't decontaminate a home. Like the criteria just for depleted uranium during the Gulf War for people like Dr. Doug Rourke, who was tasked with going in by the Pentagon to clean up the depleted uranium used in the Gulf War in Kuwait and outside of Kuwait on the highway of death. If they find a single speck of the DU, they were supposed to build a fence 900 feet around it and then put up warning signs in international languages to not go near the site. So how can you decommission a house? So in other words, every house, every street, the cement, the sidewalks, the telephone poles, the grass, the trees, the forest, of over half of Japan needs to be put in a repository. Everything. You need to level half the country. And even then you can't turn back the clock of what you've already got done. But if you were going to clean it by the international scales, that's what you would do. But the massive, despicable industry was screeching that Fukushima, and still are, like a banana, like walking in the sunshine, like eating a banana, like potato chips, like walking in the sunshine, like potato chips. It's hard to believe it, but the media, I came out for 2 years and I bashed everybody that said that, and you couldn't keep up with it. Tokyo professor, radionuclides are being released continuously to the ocean from Fukushima. Radioactive iodine 131 Pennsylvania rainwater samples are at over 3,000% of the federal drinking water standards. In other words, you should have abandoned Pennsylvania, and you still should. And the entire northern hemisphere. Riding your bike right past 1-ton bags of radiation. A complete disregard for everything and everybody. They picked up the bags to manipulate people into moving back, and they did. One of the biggest betrayals I seen was the Geiger counter companies, where they were putting just one community alone. They've done a lot of this, but just one community alone, Fukushima City, they put up over 3,000 of these fake Geiger counters, and the community is surrounded by towns that are abandoned, for starters. And that Tokyo, far, far away, was at almost 1 million atoms per square meter. These are catastrophic. These are guaranteed to make you sick. This is why there was 865,000 cancers in the first year. Extra cancers. U.S. newspaper reports on a link between birth defects and eating radioactive contamination. And that one piece of contaminated food may deliver radiation of hundreds of X-rays. So eating a single radioactive food from Japan, or from around a nuclear power plant, no less, they're all surrounded by farms, right? They're contaminated because the fuel pools are splitting atoms and there's no containment. It's an industry that hates your guts and hates insects and birds and rabbits and bunnies and puppy dogs and everything else. Well, they like puppy dogs. They like them. They like to do radioactive studies on them. At what point will you stand up? What does it take for the world to make a stand? Because you are way down the rabbit hole. You are 13 years down this rabbit hole where the extinction event is well underway. Obama picks to lead the EPA from the Office of Air and Radiation, who's in charge of the troubled Radnick during Fukushima peak. What they mean by that was Radnick turned off all his detectors, same as Canada done. Canada moved its detectors inland by 200 miles. His radiation detecting devices. It disconnected them when the plume was coming and moved them to the interior. When the plume passed, a couple months later, they hooked them back up and said, oh, there's no radiation. Iodine-131 detected in Austria, Czech Republic, Hungary, other countries. 10 days after criticality talks at Fukushima. Poland, Denmark reported radioactive dust. International Atomic Energy official says we are a little concerned. No, you should be terrified and horrified and mortified. The uranium peroxide hydrogen buckyballs, what I was talking about earlier, that's what they look like, the sulfur. And then the physical atoms, the anthropogenic man-made atoms, are ingested into it, so to speak. And these are catastrophic to everything with replicating cells. Elevated radiation in Germany, in Sweden, Slovakia. UK experts claim iodine very unlikely from Fukushima since it was so many months ago. It's called a criticality event, where the reactors, not only that, you had 8 fuel pools melt down. You had the common spent fuel pool melt down. Most likely reactor 6 had huge emissions. And 4 reactor cores melted down. And reactor 4 had 3/4 of a reactor core because they were changing fuel, which meant 3/4 of the reactor core was still in the containment. And that's gone. All the fuel pools and all the reactors are gone. The numbers we're talking about, and Earth is a biosphere. It's an ecosystem. It's a closed loop. And so this stuff never goes away. It never goes away. That means we go away. You have no choice but to face the facts and fight back. You have no choice. It's your obligation. You're obligated. June the 30th meeting revealed depleted uranium storage facility burned after the quake. Another 1,800 pounds of DU burnt. Remember seeing the pictures of a big oil facility with the big tanks and everything burning? The media showed that a lot, right? Called it Fukushima, no less. But there was actually 1,800 pounds of depleted uranium stored there. My apologies, forgot to turn down the volume. Why did you abandon all these communities if nothing but tritium got out and there's only 2.2 grams and it's in 1,000 tanks? Why would you suggest that something like that could happen? But to put 3,000 Geiger counters in a community that don't work in a town, these towns were surrounded by millions of 1-ton bags of radiation, and suggest that it was safe to be there by doing that. I think the Geiger counter companies that done that and made a fortune should be held accountable. They should get life in jail anyway. Because what they've done is actually murder on a grand scale. It makes the serial killers look like, again, schoolyard bullies. The homeless were wearing tungsten vests at Reactor 3, by the way. The homeless, not nuclear academics, nuclear scientists, nuclear students, nuclear universities, nuclear corporation. Like, how do you put this picture in the media and claim the farmers has the high ground? Excuse me. You're talking about thousands and thousands of 1-ton bags of radiation, and you're growing food. They're harvesting food right there, within sight of the nuclear meltdowns. How can we ever rationalize this? How is this even possible? How is this conceivable? Because they hate your guts. You have no idea how much they hate your guts. They poison you relentlessly for 80 years, And now it's in overdrive. It's time to fight back. Cesium-137 hotspots detected in Seoul, South Korea, emitting 1,000% of normal background radiation 1,200 kilometers from Fukushima. South Korea current administration is pro-nuclear, and they refuse to acknowledge that happened. The entire planet refused to acknowledge this exists. International Atomic Energy Agency is not going to go there and write on those bags Dana's wrong. They're not going to go there and give a press release to the media and say there is no radioactive fallout. They're not going to show those pictures in the media with the stories of the International Atomic Energy Agency saying there's nothing got out of the reactors. "150,000 square kilometers of Pacific with Fukushima nuclear materials, remarkable amount released into the ocean." A remarkable amount released into the ocean. April 12, 2013, a remarkable amount released into the ocean. The official story is nothing got in the ocean. Nothing. As of July the 13th last year, they moved the goalpost. There is no meltdowns. There is no releases. There was no radioactive fallout. There's no 30 million one-ton bags. There's no issue whatsoever. International Atomic Energy Agency certified it. And the world just regurgitated it word for word. Whatever the International Atomic Energy says. International Atomic Energy is not going to go in this community and do a press release and say there is no radioactive fallout, are they? These abandoned communities. They're not going to go to get all these owners of these communities and the houses and the businesses and tell them there's no radioactive fallout. Because the people might lynch them right on the spot, and they should. They have every right to do it. Top radiation experts, 50 becquerels a kilogram in humans and adults lead to irreversible lesions in the vital organs. Okay, so 50 becquerels a kilogram, you put 200, which is 50 atoms a kilogram, and a becquerel is a pulse every second. And it'll do that for millions of years, say. At the speed of light, no less. Pure energy. So if 50 becquerels a kilogram leads to irreversible lesions in the vital organs of adults, what does it do to children? And what does it do to insects and birds and animals and mammals? And fish and trout and frogs and everything else? And to give it context, you can put 200 million atoms on the head of a needle, you can't see it. So how are you going to perceive 50? How are you going to filter 50? Because you can't. You can't filter this. And they moved people back into these buildings with the bags sitting in front, and people felt uncomfortable. They still moved back there. And now the bags are growing radioactive plants out of them. The bags are growing radioactive plants. It was all about you manipulating you into thinking that they picked up all the radiation, it's safe, come on back. And lots of people, not a lot, but 10 to 15% of the people that lived there fell for it. France didn't fall for it. France said Japan's lost control and the French should leave the country. The Swiss said the same thing. The Swiss said they should leave the country. And they were right, weren't they? In hindsight, you see all these bags they picked up. They were right. They were right to leave the country. They were smart. Radioactive iodine found in Tokyo tap water, which means uranium, plutonium, curium, americium, neptunium is going to be there too, and all the other fission products. It can't just be iodine. Iodine is not the only isotope to come out of there, and it's a nasty one. It's nasty. And the damage is forever. Hospital, 40% of the Fukushima visitors showed internal exposure to radiation, but that's impossible. The International Atomic Energy Agency said nothing got out. It's impossible. It couldn't have happened. They're the authority, not the hospitals, not the doctors. They claim that they're using these contraptions to check the bags, and there's something like 50 million of these bags a year of rice, and they haven't found a single one that exceeded their new limits of 100 becquerels a kilogram of cesium, because apparently the only thing in Japan is cesium. But according to the International Atomic Energy Agency, the only thing, period, is tritium. But don't worry, it's only 2.2 grams. It's like 3 grams of sugar. And it's in 1,000 tanks. So why would you put 3 grams of sugar in 1,000 tanks? The tanks are empty. If you fill up the tanks with 2.2 beta, sieverts of beta per liter, you can't build another tank on the site. You can't get back on the site. You're talking about 1.4 million sieverts of just beta. You can't just have beta in the water. It's going to be saturated with all the fission products, the alphas, the neutrons, the gammas, not just beta. These bags are not just tritium. We don't see any plumes of tritium. I've never seen a model of tritium. Fallout, uranium, americium, plutonium, neptunium, sulfur peroxide, hydrogen buckyballs, iodines, cesiums, not tritium. And so they manipulated the planet into eating the food. Canada removed all restrictions after 93 days, while 55 countries banned the food for 14 prefectures for a decade. And they were replaced, the people who put those restrictions in, and those restrictions were then lifted because the pro-nuclear was in charge. It's a slimy, slimy industry full of slimy people. There are creatures that look like people. They don't have the attributes of people, that's for sure. Over 1,000 nuclear workers have internal radiation 10,000 counts per minute after visiting Fukushima. But nothing got out. Everything's in the tanks, Dana. It's only tritium. These bags are fear-mongering, Dana. They spent tens of millions of dollars picking up millions of one-ton bags of radiation because nothing got out. Right? Nothing got out. I want to see the International Atomic Energy Agency go there and tell me nothing got out. Climb up that ladder and get there, and Dana is a lawyer. He's lying. Dana's a lawyer. Nothing got out of Fukushima. Right? Let's put me over here at the top of the ladder. And I'm going to make myself really small. You can see me now. I'm going to make myself small, put myself on top of the ladder. Nothing got out. Here I am at Fukushima. These bags are just done that so you can steal money from the government. There's nothing got out. It's just dirt. We done it just to steal billions of dollars. Fukushima's totally safe. So if the National Atomic Energy Agency went there and gave a press release and stood on top of that ladder and said nothing got out, would you believe him? Would you pick up rocks and throw it at him as he came down the ladder? Or would you take the ladder away? Or would you take the ladder away? Or would you go up there and cut the bags open and stuff them in one of them like I would do? That's what I would do with them. You keep stomping on them until they stop trying to get out. Documents 1,600 Fukushima workers thought to be exposed to high radiation. But it's impossible. The International Atomic Energy Agency said not a fly, not the hair on the balls of a fly even got hurt. Nearly 5,000 nuclear plant workers suffered internal radio exposures after visiting Fukushima. But that's impossible. The International Atomic Energy Agency said there's no releases. This never happened. The Dana's a lawyer. He's a lawyer. He's making it up. Nothing got out. Dana's lying to you. Dana's making it up. The explosion for reactor 3, by the way, and that's the fuel pool in the reactor cores falling back down to the earth, was felt 25 miles away. But nothing got out. Couldn't get out. The International Atomic Energy Agency said it didn't, Dana, so you're a lawyer, Dana. And I've heard that so many times. UN committee chairman studying Fukushima radiation, UN, said we wouldn't expect to see health effects in children, workers, or anyone else. $13,646 children at a 38,000 had thyroid tumors of 2 centimeters or larger. The thyroid gland is only 3 by 5 centimeters. And pre-Fukushima, the rate of thyroid tumors, I forget, wait now. Let's hear it from the horse's mouth.
But there's clear evidence rates have risen. Before the disaster in 2011, the rate of thyroid cancer was between 1 and 2 cases.
Was 1 in a million. Like, how can you grow food alongside a 1-ton bags of radiation in a nuclear wasteland, surrounded by nuclear wasteland? How can you do that? Because they're so evil, it's just natural for them. And that makes them a threat to the 8 million species in you. They're a direct threat. Fukushima contaminated soil. There are currently 105,000 on-site storage locations throughout the prefecture. 105,000 storage sites. Radioactive rain caused 130 schools in Korea to close, South Korea. But nothing got out. The International Atomic Energy Agency said everything is in the tanks. Radiation forecast in Japan was kept secret to avoid panic in the whole of society. One of the most ridiculous pictures I've ever seen is this picture here. With TEPCO written on their bags, their plastic bags, as if they're coming out of reactor 4. Like, this is lethal doses we're talking about. Like, they're not wearing construction equipment, they're not wearing tool belts, they're wearing paper suits, for goodness sakes. And TEPCO says they burn 7,000 of them paper suits every day. But to suggest that they're coming from reactor 4 is probably the stupidest, most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in my life, or heard tell of in my life. So if this is real, then we're talking about homeless people, and they would have died that day, or that hour even. And this was used as a photo shoot, or it's green screen. Very easy to green screen when you got the ability that they have. Report: the government hid the radiation simulation because it was very, very bad. Showed a serious contamination over a wide area. When you pick up 30 million 1-ton bags of radioactive fallout from 3% of the land in the prefecture, it's pointless because the other 97% is going to recontaminate that area immediately within 24 hours. Japan's government withheld a radiation forecast to prevent causing panic. None of the kids were radioactive. None of the people were radioactive. And those Geiger counters, they don't even know what they're doing. And if you get a high dose, those Geiger counters are now useless. They're irradiated. If they get a fairly high dose from far away, you got to be sent back to the manufacturer to be recalibrated and see if they're being able to be used again. But in this environment, they're only good for a couple of minutes. Japan government gave speedy radiation forecasts, which is paid by the taxpayers. There's 5,000 speedy radiation forecasts produced in the first 30 days. They gave those forecasts to the U.S. military. And the military sent in Operation Tamagotchi, which I believe is over 30 U.S. ships, including Ronald Reagan, which was put in shipyards 3 different times and sandblasted because it was so radioactive. Hands up, don't shoot. Oh, well, it's already inside you. It's like bullets going off every second for the rest of your life. Radiation forecast withheld by the government. They ran away and left the animals to starve to death and die of thirst because nothing got out. It was like 2.2 grams of tritium, right? And it's in 1,000 tanks. 19.8 microsieverts per hour in the Tokyo air on November the 15th. 200 times the normal level Incineration of radioactive debris suspected. The water filtration, there's one community there with 50,000 in 2012, with 50,000 one-ton bags of radiation from the sediment from the water filtration systems for the community. So the water that goes into your home, when it leaves the water site, it's filtered. So 50,000 of these bags is so radioactive from the water filtration system, they couldn't get rid of it. They wanted TEPCO to take. TEPCO wouldn't take it. Finders keepers, losers weepers. Danger reading in Tokyo. Radiation near levels that triggers an evacuation. 17 times the recommended limit. More contaminated than areas in the exclusion zones. Tokyo samples had radioactivity levels higher than in Chernobyl exclusion zone. And that's a very high, very, very high level of contamination, even as far south as Tokyo. We know Osaka, 600 miles away, was brutal radiation. Radiation forecasts can by no means be released to the public, decided the government on March the 15th. Showed a radioactive cloud could spread over Tokyo. Well, we know it's spread over Tokyo. We got the numbers. Why did you abandon all these communities if nothing got out? Tokyo drinking water unsafe for infants is unsafe for everybody else. Speculations, LA Times, a supercritical fission event occurred at Fukushima reactor irradiating plutonium, says nuclear expert. Explosion is so massive, investigators found fuel rod fragments a mile away. The official story is nothing got out. The International Atomic Energy Agency is not going to go there and stand on those bags and say nothing got out. Nuclear chain reaction lasted over 7 months at Fukushima. Now, just because the majority of these headlines are about Japan and Fukushima, doesn't mean that no matter where you're to on this planet, you're not affected. I can guarantee you are. I can guarantee you we're looking at an extinction event. And I showed you that documentation from 6 years of research expeditions at the very beginning. Radiation around Fukushima near levels where humans vomit uncontrollably and hair can be stripped from the body. There was over 3,000 people died shortly after Fukushima. And the scum, degenerate, despicable, coward nuclear industry tried to blame it on stress. And we've seen many, many, many times when millions of people evacuated from typhoons and cyclones and hurricanes, and we've never seen anything close to that. 3,000 people dying. They died from radiation exposure. And there's many, many died after, obviously. Highly radioactive sewage 30 miles from Fukushima at 334,000 becquerels per kilogram in your excrement, in your sewage. This is absurd numbers we're talking about. But if everything I'm showing you tonight never happened according to the International Atomic Energy Agency. They are gone to war against you and the 8 million species. It's an information war. High levels of radioactive material found in Tokyo. 170,000 becquerels a kilogram in sewage. In Tokyo. Wow. My throat's... We're going to get a little bit to get through. Might as well try it. Fukushima kids are playing above a nuclear waste public park are now unmarked radioactive dumps. Radioactive iodine in Guma, which is right by Tokyo, and 3 sewage plants. And that was December 2011, so they figured it was a criticality event. Obviously, they're talking about iodine 131, right? With a short half-life. Reported in Tokyo, 10 of the 12 sewage plants tested positive in December, which meant the reactors were still melting down and releasing huge amounts. Well, it's catastrophic amounts when you're finding that amount in all these sewage, which means you're consuming it. And it can't be just iodines. In Osaka Bay, high levels of cesium. But officially, nothing happened as of July the 13th of last year. The official story now is nothing happened. They know they killed the planet. And it's time to stop sitting in silence. Tokyo began burning massive amounts of radioactive waste from the disaster area. The burn will continue for at least 2.5 years. Tokyo to begin burning massive amount of radioactive waste from the disaster area. Why would you take waste from the nuclear meltdown, bring it to Tokyo, and burn it in your incinerators? Why would you do that? A kind of sick, twisted, demented, sadistic industry would do something like that. What kind of degenerate person would suggest it? Massive radioactive waste buildup in Tokyo. Seeing the mountains of radioactive waste in Yokohama, the reporter said, I felt the ominous weight of the nuclear crisis, which had seemed a distant affair to him until then. Yokohama, it's in Tokyo Bay, right? Press watches as the government dumps radioactive waste into Tokyo Bay. There's so many of those headlines you can barely wrap your mind around it, actually. Impossibly high. World Health Organization initial report estimated Tokyo and Osaka, 600 miles from Fukushima, infant thyroid doses at 10 to 100 millisieverts. And that's 7 miles away in Nami, up to a full sievert for infants' thyroid doses. It's unbelievable. And absolutely possible. Study claimed Tokyo newborns had safe 1,140 microsievert thyroid doses, and they only counted the food and the water, does not include inhaled radioactivity, did not include the first 10 days when iodine and other short-lived isotopes peaked. So academics claiming that it was safe in order to get a paycheck. To murder everything and anything so they can get their paycheck. And because they went into that industry with evil intentions in the first place. 70% of the children tested in Kanto, which is a region that includes Tokyo, have radioactive cesium in their urine. But the International Atomic Energy Agency is not possible because nothing got out. There's no way anything can get out of the buildings because they're built like solid. That's reactor 3. Here's what it looked like originally. This was a plutonium mixed oxide fuel, which is unbelievable compared to the brutal, vicious, typical nuclear meltdown. The emissions from a normal meltdown is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. That is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. It's a complete loss of the entire inventories. In 2021, they announced that they got all the fuel out of the pool from the top of the buildings that don't exist, like they did at Reactor 4 in 2013. High radiation levels near Tokyo linked to Fukushima. Where else is it going to come from? 29 million atoms per square meter in the soil, pulsing energy every second. 80% of residents tested a radioactive iodine in the thyroid up to 87 millisieverts, 87,000 microsieverts. Think of the microsievert as 750 counts per minute. These numbers are unbelievable. But they certainly explains the health effects, don't it? 14,200 children out of every 100,000 needs open heart surgery across the entire country. Radioactive iodine found in 50% of the children's thyroid, up to 35 millisieverts. 35 millisieverts in their thyroids, which means not only are they producing radioactive hormones for the rest of their life, their stem cells are being mutated in their bones. Now almost 100,000 Fukushima children with thyroid problems. Used to be 1 in a million, right? Another study showed 13,646 out of 38,000 have tumors of 2 centimeters or larger, which is 35.8%. So when you scale that up, that's 358,000 out of a million. This is impossible numbers. But these make sense when you look at the actual bigger scale. 6 years after Fukushima, they moved the children back into the nuclear wasteland. Heartless. Just heartless people. Well, they look like people. They're not people, obviously. They're not humans. They don't have any of the attributes of a human. It's a mistake to call them human. You're actually making a mistake. They're creatures. They're monsters. Let's face it. They're monsters. They're real-life monsters. You can deny it all you want, but you know I'm right. These are monsters. Journalist finds Tokyo indoor dust contaminated with cesium at 1,730 becquerels a kilogram. In the houses. So you're supposed to abandon your house immediately with these numbers. Over 4 million becquerels a kilogram of cesium in the fog. It never disappears. High internal radiation exposure detected in young children. Over 1 millisievert was considered a high dose. Remember the other children with 35 millisieverts in the thyroid? That's a destructive dose we're talking about. Even the schools, they clean up the schools. You can't clean up a school. They change the topsoil. That's not going to change it. The whole environment is irradiated. 1 million atoms per kilogram of cesium. According to the United Nations, the International Atomic Energy Agency, nothing got out of it because they're at war against you and the 8 million species. They hate your guts. They're exterminating you. And if you watch this whole show and you still don't get it, I didn't know the International Atomic Energy Agency watches my videos, is all I can say. 12 millisieverts of average thyroid doses, internal radiation to Fukushima children. 6 out of 10 had diabetes of the Fukushima children. So angry. I was so angry when I read that story that nothing got out and everything is just tritium. So angry. It's hard to comprehend how angry I was today about this, the stress of that. So much stress. I can't believe the stress. All night too. I passed out for about an hour and a half. Just the stress was too much for me. To see them claiming that nothing got out of the buildings and that the world is sitting in silent. I'm heartbroken. I'm just absolutely devastated that the world is running into an extinction event with their head between their knees. And they have so much power, they're so powerful. Should the world fight for humanity and the 8 million species against the cowardly nuclear industry? This is a coward industry. And I don't have anything to compare it to. I don't know of another industry this cowardly. These are these are murderers on a scale I've never. That makes the military look like chickens. They're hateful. The nuclear industry is nothing but hateful scum. It really isn't. Okay, so that's what I got tonight. Hi, Dana. That's the show tonight. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. The world is making a mistake by not fighting back. This is very clear. You have to fight back. Nobody else will fight back. Everybody that watches this video has to find a way to fight back. You've got to find a way to fight back. There's nothing more important. There really isn't. It's fight back or lose the planet. It's not a very good option. It's a very terrible option, actually. But the right thing to do is fight back because it's easy. There's many social network sites that you can fight back now. You can just figure out how to use video software. You can chop up my videos into little 30. You can go to into my short videos. I got all kinds of little short videos in these topics. You can download them, upload them to TikTok, upload them to everything. You just put different things on it. You don't even have to put my name on it. You don't have to put Fukushima on it. You got find a way to fight them back. And you'll feel fulfilled doing that, trust me. I'll see everybody tomorrow night. Hope everybody has a great day tomorrow. And we're back to the regular schedule tomorrow night. Hopefully. Maybe not. Maybe I'll come out and do the same thing tomorrow night. I'm so frustrated that the world is silent. I know that the people are here regular or not, but I'm talking about the rest of the world. You need to find my video. You need to get educated, and you can fight back. You can win. You are the ones that can make a difference. They have me censored, but they can't censor all of us. And when we all speak up, it's game over. And it's time. We are running out of time. You have everything to gain. Have a great night. Take care, everybody.